It's nice to be here with you all again this week. And so why don't we just take a moment here and just close our eyes. Just feel our feet on the floor. Just give yourself permission to come into this moment fully, to arrive here. And I invite you all to connect to feel, to experience the silent presence of your being. The silent presence. And just begin to notice that there is something here right now. Which is awake, alive, radiant, present. Right here, right now. And so just a couple of minutes ago, we may have been doing this or that. But I invite you just to notice right here, right now. What is it that's here? That is awake, alive, present. What is this? This presence that I am, beyond mind, beyond emotion. What is this fundamental nature that I am? And so all day long, your thinking mind is giving you something very, very important to think about, to chase, to desire, to fight against, to argue with, whatever it is. But there's something here that just silently witnesses this. And that's what we are coming into contact with this moment, this silent witness. A couple of days ago, a good friend of mine, he asked me this question, is it possible to have a permanent spiritual awakening? And I thought, boy, what a great question. Great question. I sat with this question of, what does it mean to be awake? For the good part of, 25 years now. Like, what does that mean? And at first, for the first 14 years, it was just, what does it mean? Is it possible just to wake up? And then after, a handful of knock your socks off experiences, I wanted to know, how does this thing become permanent? So I love this question. It's such a beautiful question that this friend of mine brought forward. And it's funny too, because after a while on the path, after you had some realizations and things become more and more permanent, you forget about it because, it's your life. It's your life. But the beautiful thing about this world is it's always challenging us, to really ask that question again and again. Am I awake through in and throughout? And so, one of the great things, when people are speaking about spiritual awakening is there can be this incredible experience, where there is a remarkable shift. And with that shift, when it's an energetic thing, oftentimes it will burst the bubble of your egoic pressure. And let me just define that a little bit here about egoic pressure. And so, when you live in a way where there's a little voice in your head, or maybe 2 little voices in your head, maybe 10 little voices in their head, all arguing with each other, it can feel like you're going crazy and that you can't escape and that you're imprisoned. Being in prison oftentimes is the Buddha spoke about that. I think most people know this experience of being imprisoned, like stuck in their own mind. It's like, I can't escape. And so if you live just in your mind, there's a lot of pressure that builds up in your head. In fact, in the totality of your body, all this pressure builds up. And I can remember one day when that pressure burst, when it exploded. It was like I was in jail for the entirety of my life. And then it wasn't like, someone just came along with a little pin and just, popped the bubble of my own personal jail. It was like, a tank just knocked down, the 4, maybe the 6 walls of my cell. So I'll say the 4 sides, and then the top and the bottom. And when that happened, there's this huge shift within myself where my consciousness just seemed to spread out as far as my eyes could see. And so all this pressure emptied out. And so in order to be awake, we want to find a way to live without walls. Live without walls. To let those walls collapse. Now, of course, we can sit in meditation for years and years and try to force the walls to collapse. Or you can go on retreat after retreat. I tried those 2 approaches, went on lots of retreats, and I meditated an intense amount. A lot of times during my meditation practice, I would just get this glimpse of the walls falling down. But it was really a retreat practice that started to bust the bubble of ego. Bust that bubble. So when you spend long periods of time in silence or in spiritual practice where you're giving yourself permission not to be egoically centered, and you step back and you say, is there a different kind of reality? And that's what retreat, the purpose of retreat is to say. To begin to explore another reality. The Buddha spoke about this in his 4 noble truths. His first noble truth was life is suffering. I think the second one is there's a way out of suffering. There's a way out of suffering. There's a way to step out of, this pressure, this jail cell. There's a way to step out of it. And so a great question I love to investigate with individuals, throughout the week is, what are you holding on to? Where are you building up walls? Where is there resistance? Some people give me a hard time for, teaching about psychology because they say it's not, it's not useful in the path of spirituality. But the way I study psychology, it's basically an examination of where I put up walls, where I put up defensiveness. And so to me, the study of psychology to inquire into where do I put walls between me and life. Where do I put up walls? And so if we want this awakening to be permanent, or more on the permanent, level, and more of a permanent manifestation than just a temporary manifestation, we have to ask this question: where do I put up walls? Where am I not honest? Where do I lie? Where do I cheat? Where do I guard or defend? Where am I attached, or where am I addicted? So anywhere where we are, say, addicted, that's a place where we're not awake, where there's a wall. Now, addiction is a very strange wall. I say it's a strange wall because it's not like the wall of anger. Like the wall of anger, I might choose to not like you. I put up this wall. And as soon as I put up that wall of anger, I create a division between me and you, and between me and the direct experience of oneness. But addiction, it's an interesting wall because basically addiction arises through giving your power away. So it's like building a wall. And say that wall has a door in it, and you have the keys in your hands, and then you take the keys and you just throw it over the wall to someone, something on the outside. Whether you're addicted to a person, you throw it to someone. Whether you're addicted to a drug, you throw the keys to that manifestation. And so it's a beautiful question. Is it possible to live in a permanent, awakened state of consciousness? And I like, to think of a mostly permanent. And the reason I say that is because we live in an evolutionary world. And to act like one is completely awake in every aspect of being is, to me, ridiculously arrogant. Jack Kornfield, he says something wonderful. If you want a perfect teacher, a perfect saint, a perfect lama, find a dead one. Find one that's, over on the other side of the mountain. One of those really steep mountains, so you can't visit them too much. If you visit them too often, you will see their imperfection. You'll see it. That's a good thing, by the way, because it creates humility. And we don't live with a mythical idea of enlightenment, but is it possible to burst the bubble of your own prison cell and release all this egoic pressure that is built up? Sometimes, like, for example, this weekend, I went camping again and took the whole family, and I went in my little van and had 2 dogs. And there was a fellow once who I was talking to, and it really made me smile. And so he had an RV, and he had like his, I want you to just imagine his 5 kids and his wife and his, mother-in-law and the 2 dogs all in the RV. And he said, oh yeah, we just had a wonderful trip. It was good the first 3 days. But around that 4th day, all I wanted to do was go home. And so, he packed everyone up in the big motorhome and said, hey, everyone, we're going home. And he said he couldn't drive that thing fast enough, to get home. He said just all the energy in the camper and everyone yelling at each other and, poking and, everyone being irritable and this and that. That's what I'm speaking about when I say egoic pressure. There's like too much energy in the room. Now, our egoic consciousness, if we are solely identified with our egoic consciousness, there's too much energy in the room. Too much. And we feel like we're losing our mind. We feel like we just want to get home. Get home. And coming home is spiritual awakening. It's waking up to your divinity. It's coming home and allowing all the walls to drop. All that pressure just to dissipate. And to give yourself permission. Simply to be free. To be free. And so I'm just going to look at all the comments here. I'm just seeing what's popping up, and I just want to welcome you all here. It's good to see you all. So I have a number of questions. If anyone has a question on Zoom, you're welcome to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we can speak. And so let's see what pops up here. Hi, Craig. Could you speak about trauma and how this can build the walls you were talking about? Yeah, trauma is trauma is like cement, in regards to building walls. Like if you have an attachment to, say, a sports car, I'll think of myself, or a motorcycle, or this or that. I just sold my motorcycle, the real fast one, by the way. Had to get rid of it before it killed me. Those types of walls, if you have like a little attachment to chocolate or whatever, those types of walls are like the story of the Three Little Piggies. I think it's the Three Little Piggies, right? One of them builds a house out of straw. So those walls are like no big deal. Little attachments to things you like or dislike, small preferences, or just, ways you like to enjoy life. But when we've been traumatized, when we've been abused, our ego, out of a sense of survival, it tries really hard to build some walls. Basically, it's saying, I don't want that experience to happen again. I don't want to experience that trauma again. I don't want to experience that heartache. I don't want to experience that pain. And so I'm going to build, like a heavily fortified concrete wall. And so, maybe it's an 8-inch wall, maybe it's a 10-inch thick wall. And if you look at, a great question is if I do have trauma, which, most of us do, how do I heal trauma? Oftentimes it's through the experience of some type of deeply healing relationship. So a relationship with a trusted therapist, a trusted counselor, a trusted friend, body worker. A lot of times it requires, maybe 6 different, healing modalities and some good healing therapy. And it has to be therapy that's love-based and feeling-based. What happens is when you step into love, which is quality of awakened vision, your divine nature, when you step into love, basically it's like sticking a jackhammer, through that concrete wall. If any of you can remember, I can remember when the Berlin Wall came down. And there was just like this tremendous love in the air. Like people were cheering on both sides. There was guys working big excavators, and just kind of like giving that wall a big whack. And so that's what we're doing with trauma, is when we have walls built, around pain or abuse, when we're deeply guarding ourselves, basically we're meeting it, we're embracing it, giving it a big whack, a big dose of love. That helps those walls to crumble. It helps the walls to crumble. And yeah, Justine, it's a great question. So with trauma, we build the thickest walls. With little attachments, those walls are no big deal. Those things, you can just look at this like a thought. Is it true I need a motorcycle, a new shiny one? No. Is it true I need a new sports car? No. When you walk into a bike shop, I'm just going to keep using myself as an example. Is it true I need a $5,000 mountain bike? No, I don't need that. My eyes may light up. I was in the bike store this weekend, as you can imagine, over in Telluride, and I kind of laugh at bikes when they cost that much. So I'm not going to spend $5,000 on a bike. I don't need that. I don't need to walk away, in intense suffering. I can just look at it and smile and let it go. With trauma, we have to sit with that wall, sometimes for years, opening to it, embracing it, loving it, asking ourselves, am I still being traumatized? Am I safe now? If I am safe, can I begin to let go? Can I begin to release this? Can I stop holding myself? I'm continually experiencing the trauma. It's one of the things, that concrete's good is when you build a concrete wall, it sticks, it stays, it's not moving unless there's an earthquake, or some deep settling, in the ground underneath it. But with trauma, it's the same way. It's like, okay, you hit me in the face, I'm going to put up a wall every time I see you for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. But when I walk away out of your presence, do I still need to hold my body? Like I'm made out of concrete. Do I need to brace myself? Like I'm going to get hit. If you leave the relationship that traumatized you, or if you outlived your childhood, you made it to 18 and you moved out of the house, can you relax that body of yours? Can you relax that body? Or are you going to develop an identity based around that trauma? Maybe I'll be a biker. Maybe I'll be a tough guy. Maybe I'll be a Navy SEAL. Maybe I'll be, the person who never lets anyone into my heart again. And so in order to live in an awakened way, in a permanent way, we have to look at these questions. How am I holding myself? And the beautiful thing about our body is it will tell us clearly. It'll tell us. Am I struggling? Am I fighting with life? Am I tight and tense? Do a little bit of yoga and you might find out, oh, I'm really tight and tense. You get yourself in a relationship, you might find you're unusually upset over little things. It's a good sign that there's trauma there, or that I have an egoic wall between me and life. Between me and life. Okay, so Richard, do you have a question?
Hey there.
Hi, Richard.
Hey, good to see you. Good to see everyone.
Yeah.
So my question today has to do with the movement from identification with kind of the egoic thought feeling stream to, awakened awareness and what that actually looks like. Because some people talk about awakening as a movement of identity. Like that's one of the landmark moments.
Yeah.
And so if you could speak to that, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, can you say the first part of your question again?
Yeah, just when identification moves from the thought feeling stream to awakened awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's, that's basically what I was speaking about in the beginning about say the egoic pressure bursting. So most people on planet Earth, their sense of identity is just like, it's like this big, it's like their head, maybe their head and their heart, maybe their body, like this is me. And there's this internal pressure, and that pressure drives most of us mad. It drives us crazy. It's why we drink, it's why we do drugs, it's why, we distract ourselves with Instagram or whatever, is because there's this intense pressure inside, and our body is literally telling us, like, I don't feel good, I don't feel safe, I don't feel whole, I don't feel complete, I feel very small, I feel like I'm in jail. And so there's a shift that happens, that's called spiritual awakening. It's basically when those walls fall down. Now, some people, the walls fall down very slowly. My friend Rick Archer, he uses this word oozers. They kind of ooze into spiritual awakening. It's like little chunks of the egoic wall, the egoic sense of self. Like little chunks kind of fall away, and then all of a sudden they realize one day, oh, I don't fight with life like I used to. I don't feel so small. My consciousness feels, big and expanded. In fact, the practice of meditation, oftentimes when people just sit down and close their eyes, begin to, detach from those thoughts, you start to, go from being like this big to being like, oh, I feel this big. And then, oh, I feel a little bit bigger. And you sit for, an hour, you might be like, oh, I feel pretty big, pretty spacious, but maybe not infinite. So when spiritual awakening happens in a radical way, all of a sudden you can go from feeling like this to, with a snap of your fingers, just feeling infinite. And with me, I had both personally, and so I had a very strong meditation practice. So I was very comfortable with just kind of just allowing blocks, like chunks of my ego to dissolve. I'd let go of my attachment to them. Basically I would, you start off, in your head, and then you just step back, and you keep stepping back and keep stepping back. And I would start to feel, oh, I feel really big, really peaceful. But there was a moment in my life when, I was experiencing utter disaster. Everything was a train wreck. I wrote about this story in my book, and
yes, the pink lemonade moment, right?
Yeah, the pink lemonade moment, and basically, the real short version is like nothing in my life was working. I was trying to hold everything together, and I realized that I was drowning, and so I just let go. I let go, and with that, my consciousness just exploded, and I began to experience myself as infinite. And this isn't something, that belongs to me. It's not something that, only happens to me. Oftentimes, when I sit down with someone, just ask them, have you ever had, a glimpse of this? Most people have had a glimpse of their consciousness just, exploding open. For a lot of people, it's very terrifying, because their ego's like, oh my God, if I let go, I won't go to work. I won't know how to drive a car. I'll become homeless, and I'll stop paying my mortgage, and whatever it is that, I'll stop taking care of my children. That's a big one. But for me, because, I just came into this lifetime as a real spiritual guy, a real spiritual kid. When I was young, I just had utter trust in God, utter trust in life, utter trust in letting go. In fact, most summer nights I would just lay down and give myself permission, just lay down in the grass or in my driveway and just melt and look up at the vast expanse of the sky. And I allowed my consciousness just to spread out. So I had a lot of practice in this. And so it could be helpful to have a strong meditation practice and just to allow the walls to drop. And if you play with this, like, who would I be? Great question. Who would I be without any walls? And if you just notice that question, if you sit with it, if you walk through the airport and just ask, who would I be without any walls? I encourage you to notice, does any fear come up? And if fear does come up, can you meet this with love? Can you meet this with attention? Because, it's that fear, that's like that concrete, that's that concrete. And so we have to meet the fear. We have to say, hey, hey guys, stop mixing so much concrete. We don't need that. We're letting go into God, letting go into life, letting go into the hugeness of our own being. It's okay to trust. And so the process is relatively smooth. And I say that with a little bit of smile because my process was not smooth. I'll say it this way. It's much smoother if you trust. And if you've done a lot of work with healing fear, healing trauma. So if we're going to allow this bubble of egoic pressure, which creates our egoic identity, because if you just stop and look what egoic identity is, a stream of thoughts, a stream of emotions, and kind of just like a constant persistent feeling of, say, me-ness. So, like sometimes, just because I'm, somewhat, I'll just say it this way, I want to say somewhat psychic, because I'm really open, I can step into other people's bodies and just feel what they're feeling. And, sometimes I'll step in a body, I'll be like, wow, there's a lot of pain there, a lot of heaviness there, a lot of heartache there. And that's one of the things you do as a therapist is you have to be able to feel, what other people are feeling, so you know what they're experiencing and how to meet them. And so, it's a great question to ask is, what is my normal nature like? Like my normal habitual egoic nature. And then a great question is it real? Is that actually me? If it was you, you would feel really good. If it's not you, you probably feel a little bit bad or really bad, somewhere on that spectrum. Some people just feel terrible. Other people, they're just kind of, they're like in cool guy mode or yoga girl mode, where they're just like, oh, I feel pretty good, But even that, like to me, like feeling pretty good is a hell realm. If it's, if that goodness is based on, making the conditions all perfect in the world, or what, Chad calls, adjusting that thermostat, getting it just right. As long as it's just right, I feel pretty good. But the beautiful thing about planet Earth is it's rarely just right. It's normally, all over the place. Did that answer your question, Richard?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Okay, here's Taylor. He writes, Craig, can you say more about addiction? Any practical tips? Is working with addiction a just do it sort of thing? Taylor, that's a great question. At the end of the day, addiction, yes, is about just do it. Just do it. But let's talk about what just do it is. Just do it means you living in alignment with your truth, with your heart, you knowing what is right and doing what is right. And so anyone who has an addiction, they know clearly. They don't need mindfulness to tell them they have a problem. I have a problem. I got a problem. I keep reaching for that drink. Anytime there's a little bit of agitation, you know it. Because you spend all your money at the liquor store, or you spend it on cigarettes, or you spend it on, hell, people are addicted to their phones. They're addicted to Instagram. We could be addicted to just a habitual way of being. Like some people are addicted to being just like really numb and dead inside. Like they just get stuck in a groove. And so the just do it part means you listen to your heart. Addiction is all about taking your power back. Taking your power back. So part of being awake means you have all your power. You're connected to your power. When you're not awake, it's a funny thing. You feel really pressurized inside. Like, oh my God, like I have all these thoughts, all these emotions, like this is me and it's me against life. But now I'll tell you something about addiction that's, it's a different kind of experience than being pressurized. Addiction is when all your power is outside of you. So it's like you have no power. So you're in the jail cell, you don't have the keys. The beautiful thing about being in a jail cell when you're not addicted is you have the keys in your hands. And by the jail cell, I mean the jail cell, your ego. You have the keys in your hand. And by that, I mean you have the power to meditate. You have the power to do yoga. You have the power to be mindful. You have the power to see clearly and say, hey, is it true what I'm thinking, these thoughts? Is it true all these egoic identities that I built up? Whether it's being stuck as a little girl, being stuck as a little boy, being stuck as the wounded one, being stuck as the victim, being stuck as the offender. When you have the keys in your hand, when you have your power, when you're not addicted, you can look at all those egoic identities and say, oh, this is not what I am. This is not what I am. And, I can remember, for me, one of my greatest addictions was to my first family, my first wife. And the addiction was, basically, it was kind of a messy addiction, but it was, I'm just going to keep showing up, keep loving this person, trying everything to make it work. I'm going to stay in here till the end, and love will prevail. But I thought it was my love was going to prevail. I'm going to make this family work at all costs. And so I was addicted, to trying, to giving, to overdoing. And my heart was telling me, hey, this thing, this is not working. This is not the truth. This is a sinking ship. In fact, it's a toxic environment, with the former person I was in a relationship with. And it was toxic for me. It was toxic for her. It was toxic for the kids. It was just a mess. But I was addicted to just I'm just going to keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And so there's incredible arrogance in that. And I had no power. I was ruled by guilt. I was ruled by shame. I was ruled by my own ego. And so I felt incredibly pressurized inside because I had all these warring places within me fighting with each other. And then all my energy was just I just felt like I was bleeding energy. And then it felt like this heavy blanket was over the top of me. And so a heavy blanket of guilt, and so it was a recipe for suffering. And so, with my addiction, I had to lift that blanket off of me. I had to say no to myself. I had to say no to the ex. And I had to stop doing what I was doing. And it took me, a good part of 10 years to figure that out. 10 years. And so addiction, Taylor, it's all about you getting your power back. Taking your power back. You looking at something and seeing it for what it is. That's mindfulness. And you could even call that spiritual awakening. You see it for what it is. But if you have a spiritual awakening where you're not empowered, you'll quickly go back to sleep again. You'll quickly go back to sleep. So if you have addiction and you're awake, you're not going to be awake for very long. And so going back to this question of permanence, if we want to have an awakening that's more in the realm of permanence, mostly permanent, we can't have any big fat addictions. We can't have any big fat shadows. We can't have any big fat gaping wounds. So our wounds have to be mostly healed. Our shadow has to be mostly cleaned up. Our addictions have to be mostly gone. And again, I just use the word mostly from a place of humility. And no one here on planet Earth is absolutely perfect and has zero shadow. If you have a form, you have a shadow of some sort. Just the question is it a big fat shadow that's ruling your life? Okay, great questions, everyone. If anyone else has a question, just bring it forward. Okay. So this one's from Simone. Craig, can you comment on learning to step outside of your emotions and act from your heart and not from negativity? PTSD makes this hard for me. Yes, Simone, this is all about love. It's all about love. And so, if you have something within you, an emotion that's quite intense and feels overwhelming, you have to learn to love this. You have to learn to embrace this. And so, if that sounds daunting, if you don't even know what I'm speaking about, I encourage you to get in touch with a good counselor, a good therapist, good healer, a good body worker. I spend some time in meditation where you're just feeling the emotion, but not, going on a ride with the thoughts that come with the emotions. So just feeling it, feeling the heat of the emotion, the intensity of the emotion, taking deep, full yogic belly breaths into the emotion, and allowing the emotion to release. In order for an emotion to release, especially if it's a big one, a PTSD style emotion, there's going to be some tears and there's going to be some shaking. That's a good thing. Most people, when they start to feel the tears, they start to feel the shaking, they close their throat chakra, they say, oh my God, this is too much. But that's a good thing. And when it's getting there, that's your ego. That's the pressure of the ego beginning to burst. One of the ways the ego bursts is through real healthy tears, real healthy shaking, real healthy letting go. And I don't care if you're doing body work where, the person's doing like intense rolfing on you. That's like, really deep tissue massage where you're just like crying because there's so much pain. That's one form. Or if it's somatic therapy or go to the chiropractor. And, I can remember when I used to go to the chiropractor a bunch and I'd have all this pressure, all this egoic identification. And she would crack me. And all of a sudden I would just have incredible laughter. I'd laugh like a madman. It was just like the releasing of all that egoic pressure. And so PTSD is healed through love. Through love. And I'll give you 3 things. The main thing is love. But it's love, it's clarity, and it's courage. And so let me speak about that. So the clarity is, you seeing right here, right now, I am safe. And so I'm assuming you're not in an abusive relationship. You've made it out of that, or you made it out, the car accident came and now it's over, whatever the PTSD was about. We went to war and now we've come home. So I'm safe. So the clarity first is I'm safe. And then the love is a willingness to experience and to embrace and to feel. And then the courage is a willingness to stay with this, to stay with it for a long period of time. Sometimes people will do love in small doses, but that's not enough to heal PTSD. We need to do love in huge doses, where we make love the predominant experience in our life. The predominant experience. Yeah, so that's a great question, Simone. Okay, I had a couple questions come in from email, but let's see. I guess the questions keep coming up here on the Zoom channel. So let's see. Craig, so would you say one should ideally heal trauma before pursuing spiritual awakening, or can this happen simultaneously? Justina, I had no idea what trauma was until I was far along on the path of spiritual awakening. And so I teach doing both simultaneously, doing both. But there's no crime in having a strong meditation practice first. That can be a really good thing, because then you have the clarity and there's a sense of wisdom, a sense of spaciousness. Okay, now I'm going to step into and face the trauma with love. And so if you have a strong meditation practice first, that's fine. If you have a strong yoga practice first, that's deeply healing. If you're doing yoga with an open heart and you're feeling your body, you're doing trauma work. You're doing trauma work. And so sometimes the trauma won't come up until we do 3 hours of yoga. Sometimes it'll come up, if we just set foot on our mat. So I'm a big fan of yoga. So yeah, we do both. We do both. And what I like to think of this, I like to think of trauma as an incredible doorway to awakening, because one of the things that happens when you face trauma, you have to give yourself permission to let go of control. You have to give yourself permission to allow your egoic bubble to burst. Again, that egoic bubble is just like holding everything in. I'm just going to hold it all in within me. There was this great scene in that silly movie with Will Ferrell, Ricky Bobby. And the two guys were sitting at the bar. They're two race car drivers, and they were just talking about their emotions, and they brought up something really emotional. And so both of them like grabbed their beers and they said, well, we're just gonna let's just drink that down and just kind of just shut it up with another beer. We're not going to bring that up ever again. And so like that's a way of kind of putting the cap back on, getting it, pushing it down, repressing it. So what we're inviting here is to allow that bubble to burst. And in order for it to burst, you have to give yourself permission to let go. To let go. And trauma is a great way. I consider it one of the holy gates to true non-dual spiritual awakening. Because when you face trauma, you're facing, existential fear, complete and total surrender, letting go, of egoic control, egoic conditioning, giving yourself permission to step into something greater. And so, oftentimes in the world of yoga and Buddhism, they talk about these different gates. So sometimes a gate it's like through the doorway of pure knowledge, you can wake up. But through the doorway of trauma, you can wake up in a full body way, head, heart, gut kind of way. If it's done with great trust and in a healing way. Okay, so these are all great questions. Craig, can you speak about the addiction to love which results in self-abandonment and feeling disempowered? Yeah, that's a great question. Can you speak about addiction to love which results in self-abandonment? Yeah, so that kind of love is Romeo and Juliet kind of love, fantasy love. You fall in love with someone, you think they're going to save you. Basically what we're doing in that kind of love is we want, the other person to love us in the way that we're not willing to do. We want them to do all of our work for us, to see us, hold us, love us consistently in every moment of our life. And, if we project, if we project, or how should I say it differently? If you give your power away to someone else and think that they are the only person who can love me, who can save me, you will suffer, because just like you said, you will feel abandoned eventually when their love wears off, or when they let you down, or when the honeymoon wears off, and you will feel disempowered. And you should feel disempowered, and you should feel abandoned by your partner. That's a good thing. Healthy adult love invites our partner to love us, let's say most of the time, 60% of the time. they're doing a good job of supporting us, loving us. But that other 40% of the time is time for us to realize, oh, they're not going to save me. They're not going to heal all my wounds. I have to do this work myself. If you don't learn to do the healing work yourself, you'll never be a master. You'll never stand on your own 2 feet. You'll always be addicted to them. They need to see me, heal me, hold me, love me. And if that's the case, what the hell happens if they die? They get hit by a truck, if they fall off planet Earth, if they fall in love with someone else, if they rekindle a relationship with their ex-girlfriend or boyfriend. It's like these things happen in life, especially in 2019 where, cheating just seems rampant. With the birth of like online dating and, Instagram and all that silliness. And so more and more, it's good to have that fantasy burst that one person is going to save me. God has designed it, so that one person cannot save you. If someone else could save you, you would be completely powerless. And you'd have to be addicted to them. You'd have to be addicted to them. The same is true with seeing gurus and spiritual teachers and having an awakening experience in their presence. If it was all about them, you would be at their mercy. And that's not always a good thing. That's a good thing. The truth is within you. The love that you're seeking outside of yourself is within you. Within you. And that's what awakening is about, is the discovery of this. Okay, all great questions. All right, here's a question from Marianne. Craig, I've heard you speak of the divine, and then she puts that in quote, form of an emotion. The example you have used is that anger, is the beginning of the experience of indestructibility. I suffer with an almost crippling form of jealousy and anxiety that comes up in the form of a lack of control. Can you speak about this, of what might be coming forth in a divine way? Yeah, I find, as she goes on to write, I find it hard to have compassion for myself. Okay, great. Yeah, this is a beautiful question. And so, I like just to have an evolutionary worldview, because with an evolutionary worldview, everything seems to make sense. When you have a good or bad worldview, we can have a spiritual path that says things like our ego is a bad thing. Well, having an ego is the difference between being a human being and, say, being, like an animal, like a tiger or a dog. So an ego is a huge step forward. Huge step forward in human consciousness. Now the next step forward is having what Aurobindo called divine mind, divine heart, and divine presence, knowing oneself as this presence of divinity. And so to take this leap, you have to look at your emotions clearly and see, something like anger. Anger is a lower form of, it's like an immature form, an undeveloped form of swift, decisive action, of empowerment, of strength, of clarity. Sometimes when we're angry, we are very clear about what we like and what we don't like. The problem is that that anger oftentimes is mixed with adrenaline, and then that adrenaline is coloring our thoughts. But if you just step into the pure form of that anger, oftentimes you see clearly, I don't need to be in this relationship, or I don't need, whatever it is, to be in this job any longer. I need something greater. My truth is something greater. And so let's look at your question again. I suffer with an almost crippling form of jealousy and anxiety from a lack of control. Yeah, so both jealousy and anxiety is a lack of control. And so if you just look at the real great question, Marianne, is in regards to the jealousy. Is there any truth in it? Any truth? Any truth? And so sometimes the truth with jealousy is I need to have a conversation with my partner about boundaries. And that may be the truth in it. And so instead of going into being out of control, we gather up our power and we say, hey, I need to face this, and I need to have an honest conversation with my partner. So it's always wise to have an honest conversation with ourselves first before we blame them and say, hey, you're making me jealous all the time because you once looked at a girl or whatever it was. If we're jealous at work or whatever it's about. Sometimes when we sit with our jealousy in a deep way, when we sit with anxiety in a deep way, we realize there's a voice within us that's saying, I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. I don't feel loved. And sometimes the truth is, not to ask our partner to see us, to hear us, to love us. Sometimes the truth is, can I ask myself to see that little girl, that little boy inside? Can I see them fully? Can I see them fully? Can I love them fully? Can I love myself fully? Can I hold myself fully? Can I honor myself fully? So oftentimes jealousy comes forward because we feel like we are not being honored. We're not being honored. So the jealousy, the shred of truth in the jealousy is it's telling you, hey, there's something within me that's not feeling honored. And then the great question is can you honor that? Can you see yourself? Can you love yourself? Can you look inside and see that you are good? That you are the most beautiful person, most beautiful presence here on planet Earth? Can you see that? If all of us could see our souls, we would just have tears pouring down our face. Because the beauty that we are, the divinity that we are, the holiness that we are. I can remember the first time I saw myself. Like all I did was cry because I'm so beautiful. It's so beautiful, this presence that I am. So beautiful. So exquisite. So vast. So divine. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean that in the most humble way. If you open your heart and see yourself, it'll bring tears to your eyes. Tears. And so I find it hard to have compassion with myself, she writes. I encourage you to sit with the fire of jealousy. Jealousy is a very uncomfortable feeling. And so in order to sit with it, we have to be willing to sit with heat. When I've been jealous, I can remember just sitting and just feeling this raging fire in my consciousness. And I sat there and just let it burn. Let it burn. Let it burn. And when it began to cool down, I realized, there's a little boy inside who wasn't feeling loved, wasn't feeling seen. And so I made him, the product of my attention. I gave him my full awareness. I said, I see you. I see your goodness. Don't worry about her. Don't worry about him. Is what I told myself. And I just sat with me and just felt the utter tenderness of the pain of jealousy. The pain of jealousy. And so I encourage you to sit with that, feel that. So yes, thank you. Beautiful question. Beautiful question. Okay, let me see if I can just do one here, one more here real quick. Craig, I feel really sick with this whole world. I'm so over it. The idea of a monk is just a substitute for killing myself. And I love this question because of the rawness, the truth of it. I wanted to get to it before I ended here. Life is difficult. It absolutely is. It's painful. It's confusing. It's disturbing. Now, if we want to be a monk, I encourage you, go join the monastery. But for most of us, the idea of running away to a monastery, what our body is telling us, what our mind is telling us, is we need more practice, more letting go. And so whatever your meditation practice is, double it, triple it. Whatever your yoga practice is, double it, triple it. Get some body work. Take some time off life. If you can work less. Anytime anyone wants to put a bullet in their head or hang themselves or jump off a bridge or whatever crazy thing that people want to do, it's just your body telling you, I need to get connected with peace, with space, with freedom. And so I encourage you to find that in your daily life, one way or another. Because the world needs you. God made you as a gift to this world. As a gift to this world, and so we need you here, my friend. We need you here. Thank you all so much. If I missed your question, please just shoot me an email. I did travel a bunch the last couple of weeks, so I got really behind in emails. So if I missed your email, if you asked me about a session and I didn't get back or anything like that, just get a hold of me. Just email me again. I just been really busy recently. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you all for the donations and all the support and the love. May peace be with you all, and it's so good to be with you.